through 4, and I've also talked about pages 5 and 6. So picking up with page 7, once again, some subjects and predicates stuff. Again, I'm just going to kind of spot check a few that some people have trouble with. And if one that I don't go over was a tricky one for you, please let me know and I will happily give you the answer and talk about that. So, first one I want to talk about is number 3. Ben played chess with Alex. Now, the thing that trips people up here is we have Ben and we have Alex. And if you're just thinking, well, who is the sentence about, then people are like, well, it's kind of about both of them, isn't it? But you have to think who or what is performing the action. So the way that they've phrased this sentence, the only person performing the action in the sentence is Ben. So Ben is the one who played chess with Alex. So that second part of the sentence, played chess with Alex, that would still all be part of your predicate. So that's one that sometimes is tricky. Number 7 sometimes gets people. So a lot of people are tempted to say that the subject is the seagull, but we're not talking about just the seagull. We are speaking specifically about the seagull's feathers. So the feathers are really your true subject, the seagull's feathers. And then that means our predicate starts with our helping verb, were, and they were white. Okay, another one, let's see. I think number 8 actually gets people sometimes. The subject I feel like is fairly straightforward, the moon. Some people, for some reason, want to include the word shines in with the subject, and that is not correct. So what is the moon doing? That moon shines down on the water, and that would be your predicate for that one. So those are, I think, the trickiest. Okay, page 8, I'm not really going to go over because everyone's answers are going to be different, but obviously I'll check that myself whenever you turn in this big old nasty packet. Page 9, more subjects and predicates. Again, just going to talk about a couple in particular. 7 and 8 on this one are very similar to 7 and 8 on page 7. So once again, just make sure that your subject includes the word feathers for number 7, and make sure that your subject for number 8 does not include the word shines. Shines is the beginning of your predicate. Other than that, not many that really trip people up. Just make sure you're looking out for your helping verbs. Sometimes people miss the little ones like is or was, but hopefully that didn't get you. All right, so now that you feel very confident about subjects and predicates, switching over to commas. So I told you how many commas were in each of these sentences. Now let's talk about where they might be. So for number 1, you had an introductory phrase. Even though the paint was still wet, and your comma would go right in that location, right after the word wet. Number 2 is almost the exact same circumstance, same rule. You have some words that come before the subject of the sentence, and your comma is going to go right before that. So after the fire burned out, comma. Okay. For number 3, this was the one that had 3 commas in it. We have a little introductory phrase, in English class. So your first comma would go in that location. But then the next 2 are there for a different reason. It's because we have a list of things, and I kind of hinted at that in the last video. We have one book, Old Man and the Sea, so there'd be a comma after C. Then we have a second book, Dracula, so we'd have a comma after Dracula. Then we have and Beowulf. So after class, sea, and Dracula. All right, for number 4, 2 commas in this one. We have a list of actions. I watched television, so then we'd have a comma right there. Took the dog for a walk, another comma there. And drove to the store to get milk. So 2 commas separating those 3 things. Number 5 can trip people up sometimes. Usually people find one comma and maybe don't find the second one. So we have William Shakespeare, a famous playwright, wrote Macbeth and Hamlet. You can probably tell where the commas are now from my very long pauses, but the reason that there is a comma after Shakespeare and a comma after playwright is because this little phrase in the middle here, a famous playwright, is a interrupting phrase, a non-essential phrase. And if you were to take it out of the sentence, you see that the sentence still grammatically makes sense. William Shakespeare wrote Macbeth and Hamlet. So the fact that we're taking this information and sticking it in the middle of the sentence means that we need commas around that phrase to sort of hug it in place. Okay. Number 6 is almost the same thing as number 5. We need comma hugs. The 3-pound bass, which was the biggest fish I ever caught, tasted delicious. So comma after bass and comma after caught to hug that interrupting non-essential phrase. Number 7, go back to the introductory phrase rule from number 1 and number 2. While the turkey was cooking, and comma after that phrase before the subject of the sentence. Number 8, very similar to 5 and 6, but a little bit harder to spot because the non-essential phrase is really just a non-essential word. My best friend, John, just bought a new lawnmower. So the comma will actually go right before and then right after the word John. Number 9, another introductory phrase. In the basement, mice hide between the boxes. So comma after basement. Number 10, we have after hiking in the woods for 3 hours, comma, I sat down to have a drink of water. So lots of introductory phrases there. Number 11, we have a different rule. A lot of people have trouble finding this one, but just remember rule number 4 from up there. The big gray dog wouldn't stop barking last night. So we have a dog, and we know 2 things about this dog. He's big, and he's gray. Since we have 2 descriptive words talking about the dog, our comma will go right in between those words, right after the word big. Now, number 12 is the only one here that uses rule number 5. We are speaking to Jane. Jane, I would like you to meet my mother and father. And that will require a comma after Jane because we're speaking to her. Number 13, we have a list situation. I need to go to the hardware store to get nails, comma, paint, comma, and light bulbs. So listing those 3 things. Number 14, if you liked Harry Potter, comma, you'll love Lord of the Rings. Number 15, I've had enough of your silly, wild, and inappropriate behavior. So listing those adjectives to describe the behavior will require 2 commas to separate them. Okay, so that's commas. Hopefully you got all that. If not, then rewind me. Page 11. So for these sentences, remember, some of them you did not have to make changes to. So I will specify if you did not have to make any changes. So for sentence number 1, Cheryl and I saw the new school buses. No comma required. We're just talking about Cheryl. For number 2, Cheryl, I saw the new school buses. We'll need a comma there because we are talking to Cheryl. So we need a comma after Cheryl. Ryan, why did you draw pictures on the kitchen wall? Well, Lord knows, but Ryan does need a comma after his name because we are speaking to him about these pictures. Ryan wondered if he should draw on the wall. No comma necessary for wondering about Ryan or for Ryan wondering. For number 5, Miss Joan, are you taking your students out for recess? We are speaking to Miss Jones, so we will have a comma after Joan. Now for 6 through 10, we switch it around a little bit, and you see all the names are at the end of the sentence. So for number 6, did you eat the cat's food, Sasha? We are speaking to Sasha. I don't know why she's eating cat food, but we're talking to her. And we will have a comma before her name. So directly after the D in food is where your comma will go. Number 7, did we remember to feed Sasha? That one will not need a comma because Sasha is not being referred to directly. We're just talking about her. Number 8, I like your painting, Brian. That will need a comma before Brian because we're talking to him. Look out the window, John. That will definitely need a comma before John. We are speaking to him. And then number 10, open the window for John, does not require a comma. Whew. Okay, moving right along. Talked about run-on sentences the other day. And I asked you to try to fix these 4 sentences whichever way you like. So really, all I'm going to be doing is showing you where the change needed to be. If you made a change in a spot other than where I'm pointing out, then, rethink that for sure. But for number 1, for example, Lucinda Perez is the star of Nuevo Latino. It is the only show broadcast in both Spanish and English on a major network. You probably were able to figure out that this comma needed to be something else. So, looking at your 3 options, you could have added a conjunction before or after the comma before conjunction. You could have changed your comma into a semicolon, and that would have been fine. Or you could have made 2 separate sentences and changed that comma into a period. And if you did that, make sure that you capitalize the I in it. For number 2, very similar situation, we have another comma splice. The network at first provided a very small budget for Nuevo Latino. It is considered one of ZBC TV's successes. So here, you would be doing about the same thing. You'd be taking this comma, which needs to be something more, and changing it to either a semicolon, a comma before conjunction, or 2 separate sentences. Number 3 is a little trickier. A lot of people see this comma after the word then and think, haha, here's another comma splice. I just need to change things here. But that is not the separation spot. That comma is there for a different reason. The real separation spot. Nuevo Latino was first shown in Mexico in June of 2000. Then, television stations in California and Texas began picking it up. So hopefully you're able to hear that after 2000 is actually the place that you need to insert punctuation. So again, you could have inserted a semicolon. You could have added a comma and a conjunction. You would have had to put both of them in there. Or you could have just put a period and capitalize the T in then. Now, number 4 leans very strongly towards one of these correction methods. You can do the other 2, but it leans pretty strongly towards method number 2. Miss Perez has said that the key to her success is an ability to listen, and this is a skill she developed as a child. So you probably could hear the separation is around here. They already have a conjunction for us, so the easiest way to fix this would just be to use a comma before that conjunction, comma, right after the N in listen, and then you'd be done. If you wanted to use a period, or if you wanted to use a semicolon, you would have to eliminate the word and. It will not go if you want to use either of those methods. So if you wanted to eliminate the word and, then you could put a period after listen, or you could put a semicolon after listen, and that would be fine as well. So any of those ways. Okay, now new stuff. I want to explain the rest of run-ons. So for part 2 and part 3, rather than just letting you figure out whichever way you would like to use, I have specified what to do. I have a whole lot of directions here about how to do everything, but I'll just take a look at a few sentences, and if you need some more clarification, then feel free to look at my directions. So, I have sentences here about movies, and at the end of the sentence, you'll see in parentheses some instructions. So for this one, it says, make 2 sentences. So that means that somewhere in this sentence, you are going to put a period. And right after the period, you would have to capitalize whatever that next letter is. So make sure that whenever you add your period, wherever it goes, you capitalize the beginning of the next sentence. For the second one, I ask you to use a comma and a conjunction. So you're still finding the separation point, wherever that separation point is, but you will have to add not only a comma, but one of the 7 conjunctions. And then if you've forgotten what your conjunctions are, just remember they are up here in the orange section. So most common ones are and, so, but, or don't use the other 3 as much. But whichever conjunction you would like to use, whichever one you think makes the most sense in that sentence, wherever your comma goes. So they will go together, the comma and then the conjunction. For the third one, I ask you to use a semicolon. Just remember that whenever you insert your semicolon, that the beginning of the second sentence does not get capitalized, unlike with a period. For 4, giving you a slight twist on the semicolon, I said use a semicolon and the adverb however. So that means literally, you will put in your semicolon, and then right after your semicolon, you will use this word, however, to transition in the sentence. And one thing that I noted up here is that if you're using an adverb, which is just a part of speech, if you're using a word like however or consequently, they will have a comma after that word. So wherever you locate the word however, you should add a comma after the word however. Okay, so no new surprises here. A little however down here. For part 3, once you feel all right about part 2, the instructions are largely the same, no serious differences. The only one that's a little new is number 4, where I ask you to use a semicolon and the adverb consequently. So same thing as with however, you'll just have your semicolon wherever it goes. You will insert this word, feel free to copy and paste, and then you will add a comma after consequently. And hopefully that will make run-on practice very easy. Okay, the only other thing that I would like to talk about today is the apostrophe. So the apostrophe, some people like to call it comma in the sky, if they can't remember what it's called, but it only has 2 rules. So it's nice, unlike commas, which have like 10, there's only 2 reasons you ever use an apostrophe. So you could use it for possession, when somebody possesses something. So my example here is, that is Tim's car. So this is the car that belongs to Tim. So that's why we have that little bitty apostrophe in between the M and the S. Or you could use apostrophes to show the omission of letters. So when you've taken 2 words and you've smushed them together and you've taken out some letters, the letters have been omitted, then you will have an apostrophe. So one contraction that we use a whole lot in the South is y'all. So y'all is a contraction of you and all. So that apostrophe goes where the letters have been removed. The O and the U from you have been removed when we combine the word you and when we combine it with the word all. So that gives us y'all. All right, so for the first apostrophe section, I've got a few specifics about rule number 1, the possession rule. You add the apostrophe S to the singular form of the word, even if it ends in S. So if your name is James and you have a car, you still add apostrophe S. We don't put an apostrophe in the middle of poor James's name. That would be silly. So I like James's car. Let's see, then add apostrophe to the end of plural nouns that end in S. So if you have something that belongs to many people, like these dresses belong to all of my sisters, then the apostrophe would go after the S. And there would be no additional S after the apostrophe. It's not sisters's, it's just my sister's dresses. And if you have joint possession, you're naming a couple people and they both own an object, then the apostrophe S only goes after the last person's name. So you wouldn't say, we are at Todd's and Ann's apartment, just we are at Todd and Ann's apartment. So just after that last person's name. Okay, so for practice activity, I want you to create possessive phrases. I want, once you're done with these sentences, once you have rewritten these sentences, they should have an apostrophe somewhere in the sentence. So you have these kind of strange sentences. They're not the way that we would normally speak in the English language, but once you're done manipulating them, they're going to sound much more normal. So in my example, I have, that is the house of David, which is not something we normally say in English. If we're pointing to a house, we would not say, that is the house of whoever. We would just say, that is David's house. So that is the house that belongs to David. So David, apostrophe S, house. So with all of these sentences, by the time you're done with them, you should have an apostrophe, usually apostrophe S, somewhere in the sentence. So adjust those accordingly. Write out your new sentence out to the side. Now for rule number 2, I have these nice little charts for you here to help you if you don't use contractions very much and you aren't sure how words are combined. So, for example, if you're trying to combine the words I and the word am, then it would end up being I'm. If you're trying to combine the word he and you're trying to combine it with the word would, then that would end up being he'd. So anyways, that's just a little guide for you on some easy ways to see contractions. Just note that in any contraction where you're combining it with the word not, since the letter that is removed is the O, that's where the apostrophe goes. So some people want to put the apostrophe in between the O and the N, and that is not correct. So apostrophe in between the N and the T in all of these situations. Okay, let's see, anything else there? Okay, so for this section, made it real easy for you. I've got a whole sentence that has lots of words in it. You figure out which 2 words can be combined, and all you have to write out to the side is the contraction. So for the example, I have, I am your friend. So rather than writing out the whole thing again, you just show me that you know how to create the contraction. I'm. So for each of these, you will have one contraction that you can create, and you will write it out to the side. And that's that. For the final bit of apostrophes, they go on for a bit. In this section, you are going to be combining rule number 1 and rule number 2. So some of these sentences will have 1 apostrophe, some will have 2. If they have 2 apostrophes, usually you're going to have 1 instance of rule number 1 and 1 instance of rule number 2 in the sentence. So in this example, where is the book of John? We have a contraction. We can combine the words where and is to form where's. We also have possession. We have a book. It belongs to John. So rather than saying the book of John, we would just say John's book. So you find as many apostrophes as you can. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now how many apostrophes are in each of these sentences. So in sentence number 1, you have 1 apostrophe. In sentence number 2, you only have 1 apostrophe. Sentence number 3, you have 2 apostrophes. Sentence number 4, just 1 apostrophe. Sentence number 5, back to 2 apostrophes. Sentence number 6, that one just has 1 apostrophe. Sentence number 7 has 2 apostrophes. Sentence number 8 has only 1 apostrophe. And then sentence number 9 and 10 both have 2. So, see if you can find all those apostrophes and then stop there, because that's a whole lot of stuff to talk about. Okay, the only other thing I just want to give